Lauren Anderson is the Innovation Director at Collaborative Consumption. Lauren, welcome to TechCrunch TV.
Thank you very much.
So Lauren, you're speaking of collaborative consumption being as significant as the Industrial Revolution.
Yeah,
That's
absolutely.
quite a dramatic statement. What do you mean by that?
Well, I think it's going to disrupt industry as we know it, because the Industrial Revolution is all about the beginning of this kind of mass production of things, and we're really reaching a point in society where we are going to run out of resources, we're going to run out of the ability to produce and consume at the rate that we have been. And so collaborative consumption is really stepping to the side of all of that and reconsidering how it is that we actually get access to the things we need when we need them. So the idea that we can actually pay for the use of a product without needing to actually own that outright is one of the fundamental principles of collaborative consumption.
Where's your evidence, though, that consumers are excited by collaborative consumption?
If you look at, in terms of the collaborative consumption movement as a whole, the marketplaces that are emerging around collaborative consumption, there's new ones every day in terms of the different verticals, from Airbnb to Viable to Egg Drop to Yard Sale. There's a whole spectrum of businesses emerging, which is one indicator that this is really a movement that's growing in popularity. But if you look at a particular sector such as car sharing and its steady growth over the last 10 years, you can actually see trends, especially in the United States, where people are actually selling their cars and buying fewer cars than they're actually selling, and the membership in car sharing organizations is steadily increasing over that time.
What are the numbers on
specific numbers?
Approximately.
I wouldn't be able to tell you off the top of my head. In the US, there's a steady growth across from the last 10 years. It's increased dramatically.
Well, when you say dramatically,
are
we talking about 1% of people doing it? I've never met anyone that does it.
You don't? Well, I think that there's like 10 million members across the states for car sharing organizations, and it's steadily growing, and companies like Zipcar are now effectively multinational companies. So they've purchased a streetcar in the UK, which is actually a sign that this idea is gaining in popularity across the world.
You've suggested that the collaborative consumption movement represents a shift from the me to the we.
Yes.
What does that mean?
It's about the fact that we were consumed with the idea of individual ownership, and the fact that when we purchase things, it would add up to who we were as a person. And I think we're slowly moving away from that idea and seeing that what we have can actually be beneficial to a larger group of people. And when we actually pool our resources, we actually have access to much more than we did just individually.
Wasn't this idea once tried before?
In the 60s, or?
Well, in the Soviet Union.
Oh, you mean communism?
Yes.
Well, I don't think it's particularly about communism, because I think the thing with collaborative consumption is that people still stand to benefit individually, whether it's through renting out their assets or making money off the things they own. But the idea that it's available for other people to use is what the fundamental shift is.
Do you think it reflects a shift in the nature of the human condition? Are we changing what we value, or is technology enabling us to realize who we really are?
I think it's a bit of both. I think we are really questioning the values that we've had, especially over the last couple of years. Things like the global financial crisis has made us realize we can't continue to value the economy the same way we have as the kind of core of our society. So we're starting to look at the resurgence of community and community values and connection with each other as being more fundamentally important. But also technology is enabling us to do this on a scale and in ways that have never actually been possible. And we're able to connect with each other and trade and exchange in ways that wouldn't have actually been able to do even 5 years ago.
In a world of collaborative consumption, what happens to people who don't want to collaborate?
Well, I think I think a particular pathway will exist alongside collaborative consumption, at least for the next 20 to 30 years, where people can still operate as per usual. But I think what we'll start to see is that people who don't participate in these systems will very much be on the outer. Like when we talk about the idea of aggregating our reputation across these systems, and companies like Airbnb and RentCycle and all of these platforms actually merging reputations. If you aren't part of those systems, you're technically left out from being able to operate within these systems. So you have to be a player to have benefit from the rest of the system as it exists.
Does that concern you?
Does it concern me that people will be left out?
People who don't want to collaborate?
I think that it is innate in us to want to share and collaborate. I don't think there's a big risk of a 50% split down the middle of the road.
Where do you get that sense that it's innate in us?
Well, it is, because we were actually born and bred to share. We grow up learning how to share. It's something that we're taught from a very early age, and it's something that actually is better for us to do, and we actually everybody benefits when we all behave like this. It doesn't mean that we can't have self-interest at the heart of it. A lot of people, when they start using these systems, it's all about the self-interest that they have because it's going to be easier or cheaper or more convenient. But when it comes down to it, what they're really interested in is the actual capacity to trade and exchange with other people and to have that connection that they were otherwise lacking, with internet providing the ability for that to happen.
You've described the oil in this new economy as being reputational capital. What is reputational capital?
Well, the idea that when we use something like Airbnb, we're both rated as a host, rated as a guest, rated through a number of different metrics, and that is essentially forming a guide, a litmus test to who we are as a person, so that when we then use another system, we're actually able to take that reputation with us, and people can see that, well, we behave well there, there's every chance that we'll behave well in this new system. And we're actually collecting these data points every time we interact with one of these systems on the internet.
So what you're saying is, in the future, in this reputational economy, if I want to check out Lauren Anderson online, I'll be able to go to what networks like Clout or Peer Index?
No, not like Cloud or Peer Index, because they're specifically looking at our social influence, and that's obviously a very intangible thing, whereas something like the reputation capital that we earn through collaborative consumption systems is about our trustworthiness as a person. So whether we're a good seller on eBay, whether we deliver on time, whether we pay the money that's due, and those kinds of things are much more tangible and specific metrics compared to how many people read the tweets that we make.
What happens to forgiveness in this new world?
It's an interesting question, and I think that's something that still remains to be seen, because I think in terms of the macro level of forgiveness, if you look at what happened on Airbnb a couple of months ago with the particular incidents of people's houses being ransacked, those people certainly will never be forgiven for what they did, and I'm sure they'll be excluded from those systems forever, and there's good reason to do that, obviously. But as a whole, forgiveness that this can actually happen and can occur in these systems, I think people are more willing to accept that there's a minority of people who are going to behave like this in the system.
And what happens to secrecy?
Secrecy? Well, I think we only share the things that are relevant to the exchange that's taking place. So I don't think there's any need for secrecy in those places. I think it's actually about transparency first and foremost.
So everything is transparent?
Everything to do with the transaction that you're making. So everything about your the stuff that you're renting out needs to be transparent. Everything about why you're doing that should be transparent as well. But everything about your personal life obviously remains secret.
So in the age of collaborative consumption, privacy still exists?
Definitely. Yeah, this isn't about revealing all on our social networks and every minute detail of our lives being available. This is us choosing, picking and selecting what we're prepared to share and collaborate with, and what we'd actually prefer to remain individual about. I think people will always have a threshold where they decide what they're prepared to share and collaborate on, and what they would like to remain individual. And I think it's just about finding those individual boundaries and making sure that you operate in those systems accordingly.
What's your threshold?
My threshold is that I am prepared to try all sorts of sharing platforms. I think the idea of sharing much more personal items is obviously going a bit too far, but the idea of sharing accommodation, sharing cars, borrowing tools, swapping clothes, all of those things for me are no holds barred.
No holds barred?
No holds barred.
So I can wear your clothes?
If I was going to swap it for you with something else, if you had something.
Do you want to do a swap now on camera?
I'm not sure anything that you have on would fit me.
Thank you, Lauren Anderson.
You're welcome.
On that very cheerful note, I want to thank you for appearing on TechCrunch TV.
You're welcome.